One of the experiences I trust every homebrewer shares is the feeling of awe that comes from witnessing the conversion of wort into beer through the fermentation process. Even after 15 years, I still get giddy when I see the first signs of airlock activity, a nice fluffy krausen developing on top of my beer. The worst is when this takes too long. You all know the anxiety that comes from checking on a batch a day after pitching and seeing no action. This is why we love Imperial Yeast, who pack 200 billion cells of the purest yeast into each pitch-right pouch, which assures quick starts, healthy fermentation, and predictably great results. I strongly urge all of our listeners to check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and let them know that you appreciate their support of the Brewlosophy podcast while you're at it. All right, on to the show. Welcome back to the Brewlosophy podcast. We are coming at you live-ish, kind of live-ish. People are listening to it. It's not live while they're listening. I always get caught up on that. The live thing.
It feels live to me.
It feels live because we're all together. So that's what I mean by live. So we're coming at you live from Hop Harvest in Yakima, Washington, hanging out with some rad folks and drinking a bunch of great beer. We just cracked into a fun one that our friend and guest Nate Cooper from Wandering Hop brought. I don't believe this is a Wandering Hop beer.
It is not. It is inspiration to us over at Wandering Hop.
And it's Sticky Hands.
Yeah, from Block 15, Corvallis, Oregon. One of the biggest influences for some of our Northwest-inspired IPAs.
Block 15 is one of the bigger, just in general. That's cool. I've had this beer before. It is fantastic. I mean, I don't drink a lot of IPA, but it's good. But I like the beers that you are making as well. Nate, tell us a little. This is an experience episode. So we started this new series where we go and we just talk about experiences doing stuff. We are in Hop Harvest right now, or we are in Yakima right now because it is harvest season. A bunch of fresh hops everywhere, which means that there are a ton of, and we need to get this out of the way now, wet hop or fresh hop beers.
I go back and forth constantly.
Okay.
And now it's gotten so far drawn out on who I call wet hops to, who I call fresh hops to, that I can't keep track anymore. Like certain people are triggered by it, so I try and remember that so that I can say the one that pisses them off the most.
There you go. Yeah.
It seems pretty definitive as a product. I mean, as a product, you have fresh hops and you have wet hops, and those seem very different. But as the beers go, it seems like you have fresh hop beers, which might have fresh hops or wet hops, and then you have wet hop beers, which are just wet hops.
Right.
That's the way I understand it.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, we're getting some hops that are not even touching the kilns, so they're still like wet.
Yeah,
I mean,
the wet hops.
And we're using those within a couple hours. But there are some that are still on the kiln and they're technically dry, but it's not a pellet, so it's still pretty fresh. So it's like, where do you go with that?
Exactly. You know what I've found, and I appreciate this about us brewers, is we will take issue with pretty much anything.
Yep.
Also sitting here with us today is the Late Edition podcast host and our friend from Yakima Valley Hops, Caleb Schwecke.
Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you, Caleb.
Thanks for sharing all these delicious treats.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to have a fun time recording today with what's all on the table. So we're going to be talking about our experience brewing fresh hop beers, wet hop beers today. That's going to be a tough one for me. I think I'm going to call it wet hop. That's the one that triggers people, right?
I think so.
Okay, we're going to call it wet hop. Let's call it wet hop. So by wet hop, we're just talking about beers that are brewed with hops that are pulled basically fresh off the vine and all the stuff that goes into that. Wandering Hop does a really good job of that. In fact, we had some the other day. Looks like we're going to be sharing some later today. It's going to be a good one. If you like this podcast and you'd like to help us continue bringing it, there are a few things you can do, like becoming a patron over at patreon.com/brewlosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops. Again, thank you, Caleb, for hooking us up with that. And an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world coming up later this month. It is hop researcher and noted Oregon State University professor, Dr. Tom Shellhammer. That's going to be an amazing one, I think. If you listen to last week's episode on the dry hop saturation point, this is the dude responsible for figuring all of that stuff out and kind of sharing the information with all of us brewers. It's going to be really, really good. All past sessions are available on our private Facebook page to watch whenever you like. You can learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/brewlosophy. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating and a review in Apple Podcast or wherever else it is you listen to podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. We do read all of those comments, and they help us to make the show more visible when you leave those comments, they make the show more visible. People who may not have found us can find us easier. So, feedback is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who specialize in tri-clover compatible sanitary fittings, conical fermenters, kettles, and brew stands. Brewers Hardware offers a variety of unique items for home and craft brewers, including high-quality stainless fittings at great prices with super fast shipping. Learn more at brewershardware.com, and don't forget to mention Brewlosophy at checkout to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. All right, listener Paul Ravel from Burton-on-Trent, an English listener of ours, had some interesting thoughts on the feedback from last week. On the feedback from last week's episode, I found that we get a lot of feedback on the feedback that we read. Like that's a big thing. The show's cool, but people give us feedback on other people's feedback. So that's what this is. Paul says, you were talking about a suckback during cold crashing. I've just started to use the Mylar balloon method and love it. We call that the balloon lock. It's just simple and effective. I've been looking into what volume is actually sucked back. Here's what I've worked out so far. This guy went deep. He says 20 liters of water at 20C or 68F will drop to 19.8 liters at 4C or 39F, which is 200 milliliters drawn back into the fermenter, assuming beer behaves like water. There will be a slight difference, I suspect, but probably not that significant. It's also worth noting that pure water is at its most dense at 4C, which is 39F. Below that, it expands again, but alcohol content will almost certainly affect that. Any air in the fermenter will also shrink. Using the same temperature chances as above, then the air will shrink by 5.5%. So if there's a 10-liter headspace, that then equates to 550 milliliters. The listener who wanted to use a long length of tubing will need to make sure it can hold at least 200 milliliters if there's no headspace, up to 750 milliliters if there's more generous headspace. I may be wrong, but by my calculations, 40 to 150 centimeters of 8 millimeter tubing, I believe that's 16 to 60 inches of about 3/8 inch. That's more common here. Tubing would be needed, or 71 to 267 centimeters of 6 millimeter tubing. That's a 1/4 inch tubing. So 28 to 105 inches of 1/4 inch tubing. The reason I included that was because a lot of people, after the feedback last week, where somebody suggested that the idea here, and it's a really clever idea, is to use a coil of tubing as your blow off, and then that will be effectively be full of CO2, so that when you cold crash, it sucks that CO2 back in without sucking in sanitizer. And so he is offering a suggestion for how long that line needs to be. What do you think, Brian?
I think I will continue to cold crash in kegs under pressure.
It is a clever idea,
Yeah,
though.
it's a good idea.
You know the issue we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You used to homebrew, Nate.
We still operate our half barrel pilot system and deal with stuff like that. We physically push the half barrel fermenter into the walk-in and then hook it up to CO2, put a little bit on the top, and then basically dial the CO2 all the way out. So if it does happen to suck anything, it's going to be residual CO2 in the lines, in the distributor, stuff like that.
It's such an annoying issue. And I really do feel, especially with the hazy IPAs these days and how sensitive they are to oxygen, it's such a big thing you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. And those little vectors of oxidation really do seem to have an negative impact in my, perceptibly for me on the beer. So thank you for that feedback, Paul. Very interesting. You spent a lot of time working that out. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com, or you can drop us a note on social media. All right, so we had a friend, Paul, my buddy Paul Nicodem from Australia. I spent some time with him when we went to. I had to do I didn't have to. I was invited to do a talk in Nelson, New Zealand, and so my wife and I made a trip out of it and ended up stopping in Sydney, Australia, and spent 3 or 4 days there. Well, my friend Paul, who I knew from online, I think I'd met him at a conference in the past as well, picked us up from the Sydney airport where he works and spent a bunch of time with us, taking us around to rad breweries and whatnot. Well, he just happened to be doing hiking the John Muir Trail last week, 2 weeks ago or so. And he came with my house. We live right there in Fresno, and the John Muir Trail's close by. So he brings all of this Australian beer to my place. And so rather than just drinking it by myself, I figured I would serve some to my friends. And the first one that we went with is a beer called Beer Farm IPL. It's an India Pale Lager.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
Ooh, Dreamweaver. Look at that clear. Oh, we got IPA Jersey. Tim. One of my best friends, one of my favorite people. Let's review beer together and stuff. IPA for show. Learned men don't even need to taste shit no more.
Yeah, we're done.
Ooh, I love it.
Oh, damn. All right.
I love IPA,
here we go,
dude.
Here we go.
Yeah. So that's good for you. That's a good review. Hang
What's
on.
scary is I'm starting to like this shit.
So, dude, I love IPA. You know I love IPA.
I know you do. I don't.
But I get every once in a while I get one I don't like, or I have to be on an empty stomach to drink them. I can't drink them when I'm eating because I just get too full, and they're a very full beer to me.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't like IPA that much. And then I have a beer like this, and I'm like, I love IPA. This is a delicious
This is good.
IPA. This is exactly right in my wheelhouse. I love this beer.
I would expect this on tap at your house.
Oh, this is delicious, dude. So good.
I'm liking this too.
Oh, you converting him. You have no power here. Oh, this is delicious.
This is good.
So good. Let's not even review it. Let's just enjoy it on the air and make everyone listen to all the noises and sounds of what happens when Jersey and Tim enjoy beer. Yeah, that's never mind. That was a terrible idea. Let's not do that. Get ready for what's about to happen with Jersey's review. I would like to give this beer 6,969 jerseys.
Wow.
Highest rating ever.
That is pretty high.
Let me 0 Tims. So for a total of 6,969 Jersey Tims.
0.69.
So total 3 Jersey Tims. High rating though. High rating. This is a delicious beer.
This is good.
Hey, the fact that Tim enjoyed a very hoppy beer, I love it. I love it. He is growing. He's growing in his nice little palate, and I'm proud of the guy. It's no surprise at all that Jersey loved it. And I'm telling you right now, the beer was fantastic. I used to be an IPL hater. I'll be honest. The whole idea just seems stupid to me. Like you were trying to be kitschy. But the IPLs that I've had lately, in my opinion, are better than a lot of the IPAs because I just think that crispness and the that Pilsner malt flavor kind of gets out of the way of the hops and really allows for a good presentation. IPL, is it something that you guys brew, or have you ever brewed that, Nate?
We've never done an IPL. I'm loving the style, though. It's a great gateway for hopheads to start moving over towards appreciating lagers. Recently, we had Holy Mountains. Their lager is slightly hopped, but yeah, if we could pull off something like that, I'd be extremely happy.
Yeah. This Beer Farm one, I mean, the dudes in Australia are kicking ass because it was really, really good. Crystal clear. It looked more like a Pilsner than it did an IPA, but it just had all of that hop character. Obviously, a lot of Australian hops went into it. Super popular right now. Brian, you an IPL guy? Or?
I have not had many commercial examples of IPL. I haven't brewed an IPL. The only one that I've had is the one that Ray Fallon brought up when he came and visited several months ago. He brought up I think it was the hop dippity. What is it called?
Pils Dippity, the one he brewed for the brewed for the Brew It Yourself.
Yeah, it was a little old, but I mean, he said it was a little old. It still tasted great. It was a very, very unbelievable 8%. It drank like it was 4.
That's good.
Well, I guess it depends who you're drinking with.
Yeah, right. If you want to, yeah, exactly. Caleb, what do you think of IPL, man?
I love them, especially if you go towards more of like the brighter hop flavors. You can get some really good lemon out of it.
Yeah.
Another local place here in town, Single Hill, they brew Citizen Grain, and it's like just a dry hopped pills, little Laurel, little Chinook, and it's just brilliant.
It's so good. We went there yesterday, and that was the one. I guess they won some awards for Citizen Grain. That's Single Hill Brewing here in Yakima, Washington. Fantastic beer. The malt profile in that beer is really stuck out to me for being as hoppy as it is.
And actually, all that's estate grown local
really?
Pilsner malt. So yeah, it's a pretty cool story front to back.
Yeah, well, an IPL is a pretty cool story in my opinion as well, because the fact that, again, I mean, I'm kind of judgmental, I guess, when it comes to beer. But I love this beer. Beer Farm, you did great. Paul, thank you for sending that out. If you have a beer that you'd like Jersey and Tim to review on the show, you can email me, Marshall@brewlosophy.com, and we will get you all set up. All right, when we come back, brewing wet hop beers. So I've been hanging out with brewers and craft beer nerds for a long time now, and while we do occasionally have our differences, one thing it seems we all share is a love of learning and trying new things, as well as saving a couple of bucks. Well, right now, Craft Beer and Brewing is helping fans of Brewlosophy learn more while saving some coin by offering 20% off the price of a subscription to their awesome magazine. Chock full of brewing insights, tips, and recipes from industry experts, Craft Beer and Brewing is seriously great. I read every issue page to page myself. To get 20% off your subscription, all you have to do is sign up at beerandbrewing.com/brewlosophy. Want to brew quality craft beer at home? The Grainfather provides a brewing system with superior design, innovative features, and the latest technology, allowing you to brew professional quality craft beer at home. Mash, sparge, boil, and cool all in one unit, meaning there's less equipment to use, clean, and store. No need for burners or hot plates. Just plug it in and brew great beer. Then get the best out of your fermentation with the Grainfather Conical Fermenters and Glycol Chiller. Plus, enhance your brewing experience with the brand new free-to-use Grainfather Community app. You can take your brewing tools and your recipes with you everywhere, use brewing calculators on the fly, manage your recipes, and monitor your brew session from anywhere. Use your mobile device to manage your Grainfather brew wirelessly, automate mash schedules, and multitask without removing any of the brewing hands-on fun. Grainfather products can all be found at www.grainfather.com. Plus, as a Brewlosophy podcast listener, get 10% off your order. Just use discount code Brewlosophy19 at checkout. That's BRULosophy19 to receive 10% off your order. So head to shop.grainfather.com now to get this great deal. Chilling work can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the exGEERitor Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brewlosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the exGEERitor Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every exGEERitor comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to exGEERitor.com today. So I've been brewing for a while now, over 15 years by my count, but I feel like the idea of brewing with hops fresh off the vine only really started to come up in the last 5 or 6 years. Now I'm sure brewers around these parts and maybe the Willamette Valley have been doing it for a long time, but I remember all the talk being that you have to have, or that the hops have to be dried before you use them in beer. Obviously that is not the case.
No, definitely not. We our most recent one that you sampled, the Brew 1 that we did, that was, I mean, we were walking the fields 9, 10 a.m. and by noon we had put them in the mash tun, which is how we do it. So it was 3 or 4 hour turnaround from the moment it was on the bine to our kettles.
That's amazing. Was it you, Brian, who was telling me this morning that Bellbreaker has one of their fresh hop beers that's on right now is...
Yeah, right above the urinal in the men's room, they advertise that their Imperial Fresh Hop beer, it says the hops were separated, and from that moment to the point at which they were going in the kettle was 4 minutes.
That's crazy. And it sort of has to be that way, right? That there's reasons that you can't use wet hop beers or wet hops immediate, or you can't ship them out. You got to use them immediately, because my understanding is that they will spoil in essence because they're still wet.
Yeah, we put them in the walk-in the moment we get them and try and get them in the kettle as fast as humanly possible. Because I mean, within a couple hours, you might see some brownie and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we try and time it. It's a little chaotic. Sometimes I'll fire up, I'll mash in and I'll just leave it sitting. I'll race out to the farm and come back, start the transfer. And
that's so cool. I mean, it truly is. It's one of those, you read about like farm to glass or farm to table. That to me is almost the essence of a fresh hop beer, is that these just came off the farm. I mean, you are tasting.
There's a brewery in Anchorage, 49th State, and they do a wet hop fresh hop beer. And the brewer last year they had them, I believe they had them FedExed up there, but that wasn't fast enough. So this year the brewer came down, did a 24-hour turnaround. He came down, went to Bellbreaker, grabbed a beer, got a taco, went and picked up his fresh hops, hopped on a plane, head back up, and threw them in the kettle. It's crazy. And you have to do that. Now, what can happen if let's say somebody like me, I'm a home brewer, I want to make a wet hop beer. And so I come up to Yakima, but I have to ship these hops back. It takes, 5 days. How is that going to impact?
You're probably going to get some nasty vegetal. I mean, it's going to be rough.
Yeah. I had a guy send me some hops that he grew. I think this was years ago. And, he said, I want to get them to you as soon as possible. And I think he tried to dry them out, but he just didn't do a very good job. They were still very wet. 5-6 days after he picked them off of his own, homegrown vine, and they smelled horrendous. I mean, it smelled rotten,
It's that you mowed the lawn, put them in a plastic bag, and then they never came and picked up the clippings.
That's what it smelled like. Yeah, like the green bin, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you have to use, it sucks because homebrewers who really want to make a wet hop beer, who want to try a wet hop beer, it takes some finagling. You could grow your own. I know a lot of people who mess around with growing a couple of vines in their backyard, and they're able to make these fresh wet hop beers once a year.
Now, I know somebody's probably going to ask in our feedback session next week, what about freezing them? Why isn't there the option to freeze wet hop beers?
Because you're still going to
freeze wet hops.
You're still going to have all that moisture in there, so that's going to turn to like ice.
Right.
And then when you go to thaw it out, you're just going to have like
mush,
basically.
I've seen that actually as well. Another buddy just froze some just to see what would happen. And that's basically what I think what happens is the crystalline part of the ice punctures the cells. and so then when it defrosts,
What if you didn't defrost? What if you just put it straight into a whirlpool as a frozen block?
Brian,
Just that-
I mean, you could. It would.
It's a good question, I think, because there's a lot of people out there that want to have access to these types of hops, and they're probably thinking, all right, how can I do this? Well, normally I freeze all my hops. I throw all my pellets in the freezer. Why can't I do that with wet hop?
No, it's a good point. Yeah, you probably.
I believe it's Sierra Nevada. They're messing around with like flash freezing, so they don't. Yeah, it's a little
they
bit more
advertised
intensive.
a wet hop beer like 4 or 5 months ago, I think is what it was.
Exactly. Yeah, and those are flash frozen hops. So it's not. I forget the term, but it's like ice when the ice crystals burst the cells. It's like you like tenderize meat, but So if you can, nitrogen freeze them, something like that, theoretically it could work. But you got to be careful of those cells.
There is something that gets lost in the drying process. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but there's something that changes the hop character naturally. That a lot of the wet hop beers that we've drank this week and that I've tried in the past few years as well have this unique character to them. And we were trying to put a label it yesterday, Brian.
We were commenting kind of like a fresh cut grass, but not in the sense that it actually is like grass that you're mowing your lawn from.
No.
It doesn't, because it doesn't have that smell, but it's like if hops were a grass kind of thing. It's like, I mean, I don't know. I want to say fresh cut hops.
That's what they are. Yeah.
Pretty circular on itself. So yeah, it is kind of a grassier, more leafy kind of flavor.
Yeah. To me, it's like a sweet grass thing. Like grassy is good, but there's a sweetness to it that I don't think. I mean, you've messed around with them probably. I mean, definitely more than we have. But how would you describe that unique?
It's like sweet grass, or I don't know how to explain it. It's something different. Though.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. You've got the green bin, like we talked about, and it is the complete opposite of that. It's like if you walked through a really manicured garden, like a beautiful vegetable garden. I don't know, something just clean and crisp about it.
It's kind of like that smell is when you pop open a fresh bag of hops the first time that you got it from whoever, if they've packaged it properly, and you get that just burst of freshness, that first initial burst. That's kind of what it's like, just more intensified, I would say. Yeah,
for anybody who's ever had the
dankier.
Absolutely. And I get that as well. And for anybody who's ever had the opportunity to walk through a hop field, or if if you have a neighbor or a friend who grows their own hops, there's a smell to them. I mean, they are a flower, but it's a really delightful, I think, plant-like smell that comes through in wet hop beers that I do not get in standard beers that are, with dried out hops. And I have to wonder if it's not like something that there's chlorophyll in hops. There's, compounds that when you're drying it, they're getting driven off. You would think that the drying process would concentrate some of those, but I feel like whatever's lost in the drying process, it doesn't mean that hops, obviously hops made with dried hops or beers made with dried hops are great. But there is something unique about the wet hop beers. I'm just curious what might be causing that. Besides to me, the only thing that would explain it is the fact that they're not dried, right? So you're wicking something off in that drying process. And the way these hops are dried, there's got to be a ton of moisture coming off of those beds, those kilns.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they do take them when they're kilning them. They take them from 100% down to they're shooting for like 10% moisture. So when after they get kilned, they go on the cooling room floor. So then some places they have like big vents running underneath that just constantly circulating air. They can spend up to 12 hours in a kiln. There is a lot more focus now on like lower temperatures, shorter kilning time. But even so, some of these places, they're kilning 160, 170, 180, which, those are whirlpool temperatures, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about that in those terms, and they're going for 8 hours up to 12 hours. So there is a renewed focus. And you mentioned, Dr. Schellehammer earlier, but he's doing a specific study on the kilning process right now, like what is actually leaving, what is happening.
That's going to be great because if you when you go into these kilns, it's so humid in there because of the fact that they're drying these very, very wet hops. I mean, what is the percentage of hops that water makes up? It's like 82%, right? 80 to 85% depending on the variety, and then they're knocking that all the way down to 10% moisture. I mean, when you get hops at home, Thankfully, we're able to dry them because it prolongs the shelf life and you can use them, and it really does great. Again, we can make great beers with these dried hops, but it's so interesting to me that whatever that is that leaves isn't getting concentrated. I honestly think it's going bye-bye. And
on one of our tours, I forget who it was it myrcene that is left during the killing process?
Yes, that's what you smell.
He said, copious amounts of that. I don't know if that
actually that's interesting because myrcene is, they call it that green hop character, that it's what you get. That's got to be a part of it because that's what it smells like. There's you were telling me about umami the other day.
Yeah.
If you take a raw steak and then you dry that, they're gonna taste different. And
right.
I couldn't help but think because you do dry aged steak, right?
Yeah.
And it changes the character.
But it is
of that
more
steak.
like a concentration of flavor as opposed to when you dry out the hops. I don't know if I wouldn't say that it concentrates it. It changes it, but
yeah, it's interesting though.
Yeah.
So as a brewer in Yakima, you have access to the freshest hops possible. I mean, right off the vine, you can go to pick them up, follow a truck around, and probably get enough to. What are your thoughts on wet hop beers in general, as like compared to the standard beers that you're making every day?
I don't know. I absolutely love it. It's something that we're spoiled here. We get to do. It's something we get to experience, and it's kind of a category. Well, obviously, it's a category of its own. Mm-hmm. Like you can't really go anywhere else in the United States and be like, oh, that's a comparable fresh hop, but it's not because it's stuck to our region.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, a lot of our friends that brew in like Oregon, they'll get up at like 3 a.m., drive over here, get them, and go straight back, and their team's already done the brew.
Yeah.
Like they're doing it within a few hours as well.
Like the wort's ready, and they're bringing back these hops and they're tossing them in immediately.
Yeah. So we did a collab with Balebreaker and Barley Brown last Friday. And it was about 11 o'clock, and my brewer's messaging me. He's like, I need those hops in like 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, well, we're just waiting on the farm. It's been raining here and there, so it's going to be a minute. And I raced him down to our shop. I got him in with 5 minutes to spare. So, we're getting like the best of the best right now. Like it's unbelievable and unreal. Like we're definitely spoiled for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Are there varieties that you found tend to work better than other varieties? I mean, obviously the big ones right now, I think in Yakima, what I'm seeing a lot of is Eldorado, Comet. That seems to be blowing up, right? So I see that in everything right now. Laurel's another one that I've seen in a lot of beers lately. Are there certain varieties besides Citra and Mosaic that you found really work?
We just did that brew one, and that thing was just straight up pineapple juice.
It is pineapple.
I was trying to fish for like a vegetal flavor or like something like that viney flavor we were talking about being out in the fields, and it was just straight juice. Like, I know that word gets thrown around constantly, but it literally, I've been getting messages. So how much pineapple puree is in this beer? And I'm like 0. And it doesn't help that we put pineapples like in the photos, but there was 0 additives to it. It was 100% hops.
And it was 100% wet hops. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
35 pounds per barrel.
That was my next question. So usage of wet hops is completely different. You can't just sub, right? Like in a recipe?
Like we've sat in some classes and they're like, basically you want to do about 6 times the normal amount you would do. And I mean, you'll extract some flavor from that. And I used to follow that when I did my first fresh hop beer 5 years ago. Now when we do it, like the minimum for us is 20 pounds per barrel. I know that sounds super excessive, but I mean, we've done it enough and taken notes and kept track that bigger really is better in this situation.
So that would be like 3.2 times the amount of is that what I'm gathering? Because if we're doing 6 times the amount of dried hops, you're going about.
Well, they're saying 6 times what you would use pellet. So like if you did 2 pounds per barrel in your whirlpool, we're doing like 10 times that.
Jesus.
Yeah.
How do you fit that?
So we use our mash tun as a hop back, and we have to put the lid on it, clamp everything down, and close all the valves to it. And that's like just making a bomb basically with hops, and then we just trap it in there for like 10 minutes, and that thing's stressing. But we do that. Originally, we used to do like the bags, the hop bags. Those are an absolute nightmare to get out. They're steaming hot, and you don't want to leave the beer in contact with the wet hops forever. So we just started dumping them in the mash tun, using the false bottom to get everything out, and that's been the best.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy. I'm thinking about like on the homebrew scale, even for somebody who might grow their own hops, if they have access to fresh hops like that, I would think that what I would do is scale down at my recipe, my batch size to like maybe 4 gallons to account for all of the additional vegetal matter that's in the kettle.
And that's another thing you have to worry about. You're going to get some water from the wet hops, but you're also going to lose a ton of your wort from the wet hops.
Absorption, huh?
So shooting for a gravity's just hit and miss. There's a lot of calculations you have to do. When we do it on our homebrew scale, our 15-gallon pilot system, we'll use the bags in the whirlpool, pull them out. We'll squeeze them lightly. There's a term Blaze uses called jelking. So we don't squeeze the crap out of them and get every last drop out of it, because then you'll pull out like some diesel, some of that nasty green bin smell.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'll
That is
try and get
interesting.
some of it back, but not all.
So and then because my thought would be, if I'm gonna do, now I'm thinking about this in terms of Shellhammer stuff too, right? Because now that's dry hop saturation, and there's a lot of I just actually read a research article last week about late kettle hops, and it was fairly old, but late kettle hop additions actually can impart more hop character than dry hop additions. And there was, I think it was Shellhammer and his team did that at OSU. But you guys are you doing like mostly, because they're hazy beers for the most part. They're just IPAs that end up being hazier, which is another question I have. If you're using a bunch of wet hops, do you find that the polyphenols seem to create like a more permanent haze? Or,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. We'll follow like our Northwest IPA recipe to a T and cold crash it out 2 days, and you'll still get just that haze in it.
It's almost like it's like clear but hazy. It looks almost like a chill haze. Is
I
what
was going to say chill haze.
yeah.
It's the haze that I think you want in a New England IPA as opposed to the yeast starter look. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but it's visually appealing as opposed to murky,
Yeah.
Well, and specifically with the Brew one that you mentioned earlier, there are some unique polyphenols to it, so it does haze up better. It holds the haze a little bit longer.
Yeah, the polyphenol thing and the impact that has on haze, I think, is really interesting. And I would imagine, again, with the hops in their most virgin state, really, that doing that, you're capable of achieving. If your goal is to achieve that look, at least, it's more likely to happen with wet hops.
Yeah.
It sounds like, yeah,
Makes it a lot easier.
yeah. Are there other issues besides yield? I would imagine even on the commercial scale, yield is an issue.
Yeah, we've been trying to squeeze out as much beer as we can during fresh hop season. We've grown substantially, and we've got a lot of our favorite customers like, hey, we want your beer on tap. And we did a 4-barrel batch, and by the time we got it into kegs, we barely filled 3 barrels worth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it sucked up a lot. And I mean, I've seen some of the other big breweries have like custom screens where they'll like put their kids in the mash tun and they'll stomp on the hops that they've used just to get that extra bit, because you're leaving a lot of it. When we scooped out all the wet hops, threw them into a barrel, didn't know there was a hole in the bottom, but it had like filled up our drain, covered the entire brew floor. I mean, it holds a lot of water and it slowly comes out, and it is sticky fruit fly fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
God.
So you're using these primarily all in the whirlpool, or?
Yeah. So way back in the beginning, the homebrew days when we were getting some wet hops, I didn't know what to do with them. I'd throw them in the boil. I'd throw them in like dry hop. I remember one time I opened up our fermenter and I just smashed the top of it in with all these wet hops, let it sit for 4 days. And it just tastes like walking in a wet forest. Like it was pretty rough.
It sounds like it'd be messy as fuck.
Oh yeah. It's hell to clean up.
God. Well, and if anyone's ever rubbed hop cones, I mean, it is messy. It's sticky. It's all that. I'd imagine that using wet hops is just. I've never brewed wet hop beers. Brian, have you ever brewed one on the homebrew scale?
I have. I tried it one time. I grew a bunch of hops in Maine. I have no idea what variety that they were. I did dry hop with them, and it was kind of like what you describe. It's like a wet forest. It was not entirely pleasant. But I hadn't been in hop country. I didn't know anything about what it meant to use wet hops. I was like, oh, I just read you want to use 4 to 5 times as many as you would normally. So I threw them all in the fermenter, and it was a mess, man.
So you didn't actually hop the wort in the kettle?
I did it all throughout it, but I did put a ton like I would dry hop. I mean, I put the brew day together like I would any other day. So it's like I did a small charge of pelletized for bittering, and then I did some later additions with wet hops, and then I ended up fermenting it out, and then dry hop, where I wouldn't even call it dry hopping. I guess I call it wet hopping with wet hops. And I was like, I originally thought that the hops were I figured the hops were not a variety that was great, or it was, some combination of something else. But later on I learned, these aren't necessarily used in the dry hop portion.
So that leads me to another thing that I've wondered about. Again, I've never grown. I have zero interest in growing hops in my backyard. I know a lot of people love doing it. They buy rhizomes. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that, actually, if you wanted to grow your own so that you could brew wet hop beers once a year. But are you using, I forget what brewer it was last year that I was talking to who said, yeah, this is a wet hop beer, but they used a lot of pellets as well. So they blended it and they just threw some wet hops in it and it still had all that character. I'm not dissing them for that. Are you going 100% wet hop or are you doing the blend as well?
We've done 100% and we do the blend.
It's basically a recipe, right? I mean, you're trying to layer flavors and get the good out of the wet hops. Doesn't mean you have to go 100% though.
Right. And I know the guidelines for brewing a fresh hop beer, I know it's kind of all over the place, but mainly it's the primary thing is getting fresh hops and using them within a 24-hour window, which we always nail. We didn't do it within 6 minutes or whatever, but we got really, really close.
Well, they're on a farm.
Yeah. They have that luxury.
Yeah. We were hanging out at Bale Breaker yesterday and who doesn't love Bale Breaker?
They're the best.
They're killing it and just had a great time. What was the fresh hop beer you had over there you were talking about?
Boy, I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Piled High.
Piled High is their Imperial 8.2% fresh hop beer, and I totally forgot the list of hops that are in it.
But I would imagine that they're doing a blend of right. It's not all wet. That would be so difficult on the commercial scale with your guys' of just as economy of size. I mean, you would lose so much beer.
Yeah. Before we actually had an understanding of how fresh hops were being done, I remember the first batch I ever did, I got fresh Cascade. So I put those in the boil. We did that. And then I was like, well, I have to dry hop it now. What's the next hop that's going to be harvested? And back then it was called 438 or Ron Mexico. It didn't really have a name. And we dry hopped with that. That one actually turned out like pretty awesome for sitting on wet hops for a couple days. But
that is now what we call Sabro. That's right. Yeah, Ron. We got a hater in the house, I think.
there's a long-standing beef with me in that hop. We tried to brew fresh hop with it last year, and that whole squeezing too much thing, I think we accomplished it, and it was like straight diesel fuel.
With Sabro, really?
Yeah, I squeezed every last drop out of it, and we probably got some oils that we necessarily didn't need.
Yeah.
But it was brutal, and I sat on it for like 2 weeks. I was like, well, maybe the bitterness will go down. And it was to the point where I was like, all right, do we have anything that needs degreased or polished up? Because this is ruthless.
That sounds horrible.
Is there anybody out there that you know that are using any amount of wet hops for dry hopping?
I know Bale Breaker did.
Okay.
They cranked out a beer and put like 2 body bags worth of hops, of wet hops in the dry hop. It took like a 10-barrel batch down to 4.5, 5.5.
That's what I'm saying. That's such a hit to your yield.
Yeah.
And that's bottom line, right? I mean, that'd make me nervous if I was running a business off of that.
Yeah. We've been having a big struggle with keeping up with the fresh hop because we use our mash tun when we're double batching. We have our next batch ready to go. And now that we're using our mash tun for the wet hops, I can't double batch. So we're just single batching 3.5 barrels here and there, which we have enough accounts around the Seattle area. We could easily do 10 barrels and still run out.
Yeah.
So it sucks for us because we can only single batch, or it'd be like honestly an 18-hour brew day to get double batching. And then by then the hops are going to be another 6 hours old. Yeah. And that kind of goes against everything we've been doing.
Is there, the using immediately is a big deal. Is there something that happened? I mean, 6 hours, in my head, I'm like, oh, it's only 6 hours. Not a big deal. Clearly you want it as soon as possible. What happens? Is it just this? They start to degrade? Is that kind of the thing? Or
yeah, I think they just start putting off some vegetal. I mean, I'll notice some browning, like sitting in the walk-in because of the amount of moisture in there. Like you can't leave them out in the open room. They're just going to start heating up, and that's going to defeat the purpose of a fresh hop. And then you leave them in there, and that moisture sitting in your walk-in just starts aging them just as fast. So it's like no win.
Yeah.
And you got to think, like, they are out in a field, so some of them do have mold spores on them, whatever. So if you give them 12 hours, they can start molding, mildewing, just like...
Yeah, that's the big thing that I've heard is that they start to mold and then they start to get slimy. Somebody called it slimy. Yeah. And I know what that is just from other, like, fruits and vegetables. When they go bad, they get that kind of slimy film on them. And that's kind of the sign. I told you that about that guy who sent me some hops off of his field. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it was. And I wish I could describe. I told John Snyder yesterday, who's unfortunately not with us because he's watching the Seahawks kick ass today.
Oh, so, nice.
I know. But I was telling him that when I opened that bag, and they were sealed well, vacuum sealed and all that, it had like a feety, like dirty feet kind of scent to it. It was more than just wet sock type of thing. And Yeah, not good. So if you are going to brew with wet hops, you need to mind the fact that as soon as they come off the bind, you got to use them right.
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to take a quick break. Our lunch just showed up and I want to eat. We are also real quick before we head out. I know this has nothing to do with hops, but what are we drinking here, Caleb? This is amazingly good.
Oh yeah, it's some local-ish Treveri cellars. They do sparkling champagne style since we're not in France, but real good stuff.
I mean, you just
awesome.
completely amped up our hoity-toityness in here by
Pinkies out.
Pinkies out. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some specific hops that we've tasted since we've been here in Yakima, and we're going to drink some more beer, talk more about those, and then Nate, I was hoping maybe you could share some tips, maybe a recipe or two, that stuff that you would do with wet hops, including whether you're blending in dried out hops as well. All right, stick with us. We'll be right back. When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, did you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD. That's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. I feel like I say this a lot lately, and I know that it's just because I'm a boring person, but I don't do a lot of the things that we end up talking about on the show. I've never brewed with wet hops. I've said that earlier. Part of the reason is that I've never grown my own hops. You can't have them shipped down to you. If I could brew with them, I probably would. But I figured what we could do now is talk with Nate about your experience brewing these wet hop beers. Like, if you have any tips, maybe share a recipe with us. And I know that you brought a beer to share with us as well. And is it a wet hop beer?
It is not. It is our original hazy that brought the haze craze to Yakima.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're responsible for the haze craze in Yakima.
It's my fault.
So what are we talked a lot about, what wet hops are and how to use them and all of that, but I figured if maybe we could dig down a little bit deeper into what you do specifically, and if you have any tips for homebrewers who happen to have access to these types of hops.
Okay. When we typically use the wet hops, so I'm just going to speak mainly from like my original starting my home brewing in the garage. Like one of the first home brews I ever did was pretty much a wet hop brew. It was probably my third ever brew.
So you're from Yakima originally. So you grew up around this. Tell us your story first. The Wandering Hop story.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Wandering Hop Breweries, a small little nano brewery here in Yakima. We are celebrating 2 years this month of being open.
Congratulations, man.
I'm pretty sure I blinked and now it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
Like it went super fast. It was an idea that was just born maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was just working with my dad, and he told me to go find my own piece of my own pie. And I just looked him dead in the eyes and said, I wanted to start a brewery. And he asked if I had any brewing experience, and I just outright lied and nodded yes. But I had always been around like the Bale Breaker and a part of the beer scene. I've absolutely loved the camaraderie and the friendships and beer. So
the community of beer in general, whether it's on the home brewing side or the commercial side, I think is probably the best part of this thing. I think it's what makes it's so enticing to people want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I mean, coming out of a sales background before this, it was just like, you don't want to trust anyone. And then you come into the brewing industry and it's trust everyone. I mean, everyone wants to help you. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally Bale Breakers bailed us out at least 50 times so far. Like we didn't have a keg washer for the longest time, and we would just show up and I'd be that obnoxious kid who would interrupt the middle of like a brew day just to come wash a couple kegs really quick so we could stay in business. But yeah, so back in the original start of launching this whole thing, we bought a 15-gallon brew house little pilot system from More Beer, and it sat in the garage for a couple months before I even figured out how to use it. Like I was that green to brewing. I had brewed 2 stovetop batches.
Oh my God.
The first one I ever did was a Manny's Pale Ale clone because that was like the hot beer way back when I started getting into craft beer. And not knowing what I was doing, I dumped everything into the carboy. I'm talking like all the hops, everything was in there. And when I kegged that off, we'd sit around the table and everyone's doing a sample, and I think we got about 1.5 pints in and just put everyone to sleep. I mean, it was thick.
Yeah,
we'll say that.
Was it high alcohol? I'm assuming.
Oh yeah,
it
was super high, and just the hops just weighed heavy with each sip because I mean I let everything sit in fermentation. Like I'd filtered nothing out. I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, it was wonderful.
The first hazy. You did bring the hazy.
I know. I'm gonna go dig up that recipe from a decade ago, and we'll bring it back. But yeah, we started brewing in the garage. My father-in-law and I kind of gutted a garage and just ran with it. And the first beer I ever did, I tried to clone 90-minute IPA from Dogfish because they're huge inspiration for us. But that was rough. I think my original gravity was 1.100 basically. So yeah, and I ended up getting 8 gallons of what should have been a 15-gallon batch. So we dubbed that Bitter Bastard, and I put it in bottles and wrecked every one of my friends' palates.
I've talked about my first time ever brewing an IPA, and it's not far off from that. This was back in the days of you didn't clone beers; you just went to the homebrew shop and bought their kit. Yep. 2003, and what happened was I started designing my own recipes 4 beers in, right? Because that's the fun part. It was an IPA, and I believe it got like 6 ounces of whatever hot hop it was back then. I'm sure it was like Cascade or something at 60 minutes, and there was no dry hop. It was enamel, eroding, bitter, and painful to drink. And of course, everybody loved it. We all loved it because you had to.
Yeah. Free beer is the best beer.
Yeah, that's right. You know what I did? I told this story before. I traded a whole, I don't know if it was that beer or I made some Almond Joy beer that was fucking horrendous. I traded it for free Comcast cable.
Oh my
dude! The guy that I like lived next to worked for Comcast. He was like, dude, if you give me a case of beer, I'll come unlock your shit and hook you up with free cable. So back to wet hops.
Yeah, coming full circle now.
Yeah. Oh, it was so cool. We had free cable for 1.5 years.
Oh man.
Those were the days. Beer gets you places. You know. Mm-hmm. So you're a home brewer. Anyways, that's a rad story. Does your father-in-law still brew with you? Does he come out to the brew house? And
No, he shows up to the tap room every once in a while, disappointed that we don't have our scotch on or anything that has malt and less hops.
yeah, I mean, you're not wandering malt.
No, we were wondering hop where my little slogan, if you got them, use them. And we've got plenty.
That's a good slogan.
Yeah.
All right, so you're hanging. You said the first batch that you brewed was basically a wet hop.
Yeah, I was like 3 batches in, just starting to figure out the system, and my buddy Jeff over at Haas dropped off 2 binds, not bags of hops, but binds. And he's like, "Here you go, man. I mean, if you want to do this is your chance." So I stood there and just started picking them all, and without thinking, I just dumped them all in the last 10 minutes of the boil.
That's probably what I would do. I mean, if somebody just dropped them off, I would think that you throw them in late in the in the kettle and. Hope. I mean, what are you laughing for, Brian? What would you do?
My first thought was like, oh, you put them in the dry hop.
Yeah,
You want to maximize flavor and aroma, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just threw them in for the last 5-10 minutes, let them just boil away, then got done, and I went to immediately chill through our little coil chiller. Yeah.
Oh.
So you can just imagine. It started chilling for about 10 seconds, then you just hear thump.
Thunk. Yeah, it's seized
Pump's
up.
just like, bye.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, that turned into panic mode where you start doing the home brewer mentality. And I was like, all right, we've got a stainless screen. All right, I'm going to go sanitize that.
Yep.
Honey, where's the colander? Like, just random ideas.
Do we have any ice?
Right. This could be a long brew day. But, yeah, it turned out, I mean, we had bunch of grassy aroma, that's for sure, because that's the one I dry hopped with more wet hops essentially. And yeah, it was a bit grassy. Doing it again now that we know what we're doing when we're on the pilot system, we'll take just some small bags and pack them full. 5 or 6 bags gets you a couple pounds.
Yeah.
And we'll just finish the boil, throw them all in, put the lid on, and let them steep 5-10 minutes. Like my goal is never more than 15.
Oh, really? Is there? I've actually heard this from somebody else that even with regular, dried out hops, that there's something about a hop stand as the wort's chilling down. This is what somebody proposed. As the wort's chilling down, the length of time that it's in contact with that wort through those different temperatures starts to extract that like grassy, almost like a vegetal characteristics. I don't brew beers like that very often, so I've never had experience with that, but. Yeah, I know you do, Brian. I mean, what do you even whirlpool hop anymore on the homebrew scale? Do you think that's a...
I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll think, I could whirlpool for 20 minutes, or I could just put them in a flame out for a couple minutes, or, maybe I'll try 170 this time. I've never actually sat and done side by side. A lot of times we'll say, this was better than this, but, there's so many different things that go into the way that we taste beer. We think, I did this, so it probably is going to have this characteristic. I think I'm getting that characteristic out of it.
Yeah.
So unless I'm doing a side-by-side or, a triangle or something like that, it's hard to reliably say, I noticed a difference in this batch versus this batch, because you're constantly changing up your hops, you're changing up your malts to try and get something a little bit different every time. So I would say my standard protocol right now is like, a small 20-minute, a 5-minute, a 1-minute. And then I do about, a 15-minute whirlpool, a little lower, and that could be 170, 180. It's, if I'm brewing for myself, I just kind of play it by ear. If it's something for an experiment, obviously we're a little more focused on temperature, but I just kind of do whatever's easy at the time. If I run the water for a little bit and I'm at 170, perfect. If I run the water a little bit at 160, that sounds good today too.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting to think of, and I'm sure Nate has more to offer on this than I do, of course, but. The difference is maybe they're small, but the difference is when you're using wet hops as opposed to using dried hops. When in things that you just need to consider in the brewing process. You just poured us a beer. We're going to pretend it's a wet hop beer.
Got it.
But the story goes that you have a Brew 1 beer on batch, wet hop. That's freaking fantastic. It does taste like pineapple juice.
It is pineapple.
It's pineapple, and it's that danky pineapple, like overripe danky pineapple juice. It's really good, but you got to save it for a party. So we're drinking haze or
let's have a party.
The NE IPA.
No
Yakima. Arrogance to the name at all.
So does it stand for anything? It does look like an acronym the way you have it written out there.
New England IPA.
You should make a Yakima IPA. That should be wet hop beers. Should be the Yakima IPA.
Yakima style IPA.
Yeah. So what are some considerations though? And we talked about the 6-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're going even higher than that.
Right. But on a homebrew scale, 6-to-1, you're still going to get the benefits of using a wet hop in there. I mean, you're going to notice a difference where if you did, I don't know, say 5 ounces of Citra in your Whirlpool or a pound of Citra wet hop in your Whirlpool, you're going to get just crazy citrusy notes, some of that true farm grassiness.
Yeah.
I mean,
The walking through the field smell.
yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's my favorite thing about these wet hop beers.
It's like they capture the smell in the kilns. Like if you've ever walked through the kiln,
Yes.
and it's like you can see the aroma in the air almost, and you're just like, yes, and that's what you get out of those.
Yeah, it's awesome. The one of the neat things that I've seen around town right now is that it's not just IPA. People are using wet hops in pilsners. They're dry hopping. I saw one place had like an amber ale or something like that with wet hops, and it's cool because you're using these hop varieties that work well in those styles anyways, but it adds a different dimension to them, which is really fun. You're obviously brewing a ton of hoppy IPA right now. I mean, I would imagine for you and your purposes, that's the style that really does showcase the.
That's what works best for like our brew house and what we're known for, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, people aren't going to show up to our place for like a wet hop pilsner. They're going to know we can't make anything clear. Come on.
I was talking to Scott Janish from Sapwood Cellars, him and Mike Tonsmeyer, and he told me, he goes, if I knew how to make a clear IPA, I would. But he goes, we throw so much hops at them that they just come out hazy no matter how hard we try. He said that he tried to make a West Coast IPA, and he was like, it was a New England IPA.
We got lucky. We had Jim Boyd come in to our tap room on Saturday from Roy Farms, and he ordered the one beer that I have that is crystal clear, and I've just set it down in front of him with a big old smile on my face. As like, it was a 1 in 12 shot, and thank goodness it worked.
Yeah, there you go.
It was great.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, is there a specific recipe that you think works well for you? I mean, obviously you got something that works well for you, maybe translated down to the homebrew scale.
Yeah, our smaller scale recipes, we keep it pretty simple. It's 2-row flaked wheat, flaked oats, and we were doing carapils, and we switched over to just some white wheat. But it's like 75% 2-row, and then we split the rest of it up equally. We do a little bit heavier on the flaked wheat, but then last 5 minutes to flame out. I mean,
That's all your hops.
Yep. Typically, when we're doing a hazy style, there's nothing in the boil. It's always chilled and then added. Which does help when you're messing with the fresh hops, because I don't want them in there for that long. So we'll chill it down, throw them in the bags, give them like a 10-15 minute whirlpool, pull them out, and then the last time I did squeeze them. The easiest was using like pots and pans lids, like stainless pots and pans lids, because you can't grab those bags. Those things are hotter than hell.
Oh,
and
yeah. 212, yeah.
Definitely learned the hard way. So
You brew the hard way, I hear.
I definitely do. We have nothing easy over there.
No, I mean, they're delicious. What I really like about your the New England IPA and the Brew One that we tried is they do have a little more body than some of the other some of the other wet hop beers that we have tried. I do like that. At first I wasn't sure whether it was a different malt, but it sounds like maybe it comes from a little more wheat and oats and probably what most people are using. But it's not like it's not like a maltiness. It's just it balances out. I hate to use the word balance because everybody says, "Oh, this is so balanced these days."
Right.
But
I hate hating on balance. Everybody started hating on the word balance a couple of years ago. Did you notice that in the beer world? So just say it's okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great word, but it does. I feel like it does round out the beer a little bit better.
Yeah. This is good. I don't drink much hazy IPA, but the beers you make are great. You know that. The one you have on tap right now, Brew One, pineapple juice, amazing. Another one that I've seen a few times around town is Sabro. People are using that like crazy right now. And we had the opportunity to go hang out with the folks from Haas the other day, and they have, in their test kitchen, if you will, their test bar. They were serving us some beers. I don't know if any of those were fresh hop though. I feel like maybe they weren't.
They have a Brew One fresh hop over there right now.
That's the one. So that's
that's the one that we tried over in the basement of Haas.
That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
That was different than the one, because the one we had in the tasting room was the Brew One and Citra mix.
Yes.
That
we ended up mixing with something else.
We ended up mixing that with the Sabro.
That's right.
And it was amazing.
Yeah, Sabro. That is one. I had a wet wet hop, and I don't know what the percentage of wet hop was in there as opposed to the dried hops, but Sabro, Caleb, talk to us about Sabro. That is a wild freaking hop, and I are they pushing it hard right now? I feel like it's going to work well in New England IPA, and this isn't going anywhere. I mean, people thought that New England IPA was going away for a while. It's not going anywhere. The fresh hop version to me, yeah. The fresh hop version of the Sabro beer that I had yesterday had exactly what I expect from the Sabro with that walking through the fields thing. But Sabro, crazy hop.
Yes, Sabro's going places. It's incredibly unique. It does have like that coconut, vanilla, like caramel cream kind of thing going on to it. But then there's just tons of stone fruit to it. It's a Neo-Mex hybrid. So it does have some wild genetics, as you put it. So there is a little funk to it. It's unique. Nothing else is like it out there. And what makes it so good for fresh hops is that it picks incredibly early in the season.
Oh, that's what they were saying at Haas. Yeah, that's one of the first harvested hops out there. So you guys are getting it first thing in the season. That's cool.
It's nice when something's early in the season because they moved fresh hop. Like the Fresh Hop Ale Fest moves around, the Washington Beer Awards for it move around. Then you've got GABF now has a fresh hop category. So trying to juggle all your tanks with the picking windows, with the festivals and the awards, it's really nice when a hop is picked early and it's a good hop.
Yeah.
Well, and for the most part, Citra and Mosaic, those are kind of overlapping in their picking window a little bit. So there is a really, really high concentration right in the middle of the harvest schedule. So yeah, anything on the beginning or the end is definitely a winner in the farmer's eyes right now.
I feel like in the world of hops, the sought after characters, or what seems to be selected right now by the whoever the growers, the researchers, and all that stuff, is coconut. I mean, the coconut vanilla thing is really, really becoming popular. Brew One has it. Sabro has it. There was another one that you were just talking about it that has like this weird oaky, almost like whiskey.
Provoke.
Well, so you're actually thinking of HBC 472.
472
from the Haas tasting room.
That's right.
Yeah. And so that one is also a Sabro half sister.
Is that what they're calling Provoke?
No. That's
so,
different.
So Provoke is a little bit different. Provoke actually takes it takes hop pellets and then grinds them up with toasted oak staves.
Right.
So Provoke is
crazy.
hops and oak together. But HBC 472, it's a hop variety that tastes like
There's
oak
so
and
much
bourbon and like. I know you were saying a lot of like that oak vanillin.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That vanillin that you get from a really, really good scotch or a really good bourbon. And I mean, it's hard to explain to me. It's 472, right? It's hard for me to explain in words because it's so unique. It's not your typical hop. Somebody was saying that they brewed with it in a porter. I mean,
we do our stout and our porter with it. And it gives it like a faux barrel age.
Yeah.
And we make it clear it's not barrel aged. We're not trying to cheat people, but
you could get away with it, dude.
oh yeah, it's serious barrel age.
It's so weird, and it took me off guard when we were trying it over at
I thought
Haas.
it was ground up with oak. It has that much oak vanilla presence to it.
Now that's Provoke, which is
I'm saying that's.
Yeah.
I said it could have been.
Oh yeah,
because it
for
has
sure.
That much.
Yeah, Provoke. That's such a fascinating. I'm surprised that hasn't been done yet. I mean, it's being done now. Is Provoke available for people who want to get a wood aged character that's actual wood, not just the hops, right?
Correct. Yeah, it is currently available to the home brewers right now. So there's the untoasted German oak variety and then the toasted American oak variety. So two separate Provoke varieties, but they're both very similar. You get
So that one obviously you're not going to use a wet hop because you would just have to grind up some.
Right. Just, consider it like 2 to 5 days max on the dry hopping towards the end.
Right.
And bam. Yeah. It dries the beer out really nice. You do get some really good, barrel aged characteristics from it.
That's awesome. And because of the fact that the wood is ground up so fine, the contact time, I mean, it doesn't take long at all for that wood character to. We're going to have to play with that, dude.
Yeah. And especially, in a high ethanol environment towards the end of fermentation, it does it pulls some really good stuff out.
Yeah. What's been your favorite wet hop beer that you've had this year? Had, brewed, whatever?
I mean, the Brew One's the only one we've kegged, but I did take a sneak of the fresh hop NE IPA, and that's tasting killer. We did almost 40 pounds per barrel on that one. We put Azaka in it, and then a little bit of pellet from Citra Mosaic, but it's tasting incredible.
Yeah,
So we'll
Azaka's
see.
a cool hop. Do you get
Azaka's
like
fun.
peachy O rings?
Yeah.
That's what I get from it too.
Yeah, those little sour peachy rings
Yep.
that were like 5 cents a piece at the
Yep.
mini mart. Yeah,
Tastes exactly like those to me. That interesting.
So you're saying that's in the bright tank over at your place right now?
Brian's trying to come up with a
we're
plan
open
for you
till
there.
6.
No, because, okay, well, I want to step back for just a second. We talked that we're pouring here, we're drinking the NE IPA, and you kind of breezed over it and said, let's pretend it's a fresh hop. And now we know that there actually is a fresh hop. But for all the people that are out there that are New England IPA heads, and I know I have been in that phase for quite some time, this is phenomenal, dude.
Thank you.
I didn't drink this one the other day when we were at the brewery because the brew one was what I was most excited about. And then you had another one, and I totally forgot what it was. that I drank.
Hosmanian Devil was on.
Oh yeah.
HPA 016.
Yeah. And I had your, I think it was your kettle sour.
Oh yeah.
Was it? That was awesome. But I didn't have this because I had it last year. It's like I knew it was good. I wanted to try something different, but this is remarkable. I mean, I have not had many New England IPAs that are this smooth, and as they warm up, they maintain that smoothness because a lot of them still, they'll get a little bitter in the not bitter in the in the finish, but a little kind of like a bitter grittiness to them that isn't quite as pleasant. Do you have any tips or tricks for the people out there that are brewing these styles? Because this is so smooth.
It's very smooth, and it doesn't have that chalky thing.
It doesn't have any
Yeah.
of that, even as it warms, which you don't find hardly at all.
We've avoided using like lactose or maltodextrin or anything like that in those. And that's just
Thank
that
you.
2-row. Yeah, we're trying to keep the diabetes down. So yeah, we've eliminated all that. I mean, our milkshake IPA, obviously we're putting some
Right,
lactose,
yeah.
but still very minimal.
Did you make that only because you knew it would sell, or do you actually like it? I ask this to all my brewing friends.
Originally we did it like as a personal project. Like I tried one. I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Well, nobody around here makes one and I kind of want to try it again.
Yeah.
So we brewed a small batch and then we released it. And of course it was like just blew everyone's minds. So now we keep it around because my inbox gets very full if we do not.
Yeah, that's the thing. My buddies with the guy who runs House Pendragon down there, and they've got to have. He goes, if we didn't have hazy IPA on, people wouldn't show up, and when we don't, we get complaints. It's so interesting how that drives, and I'm cool with it. I make fun of it sometimes, but I'm cool with it. And I'm the guy who goes in and he has a cream ale. I'm the only one sipping my goblet of cream ale, in his brewery. But yeah, it's great beer, dude.
Yeah,
thank you.
This is really phenomenal.
I hate to tell you, it's from February. Like it's
still drinking great.
That's why it's so bad.
That's why I hate it too.
That's why I hate it. Yeah.
No, it's mellowed out originally. I mean, it's like in your face. You get all the flavor and
No,
aroma.
I mean, it's not the hardest
and now
punch
it's like
in the face, but it's so
mellow
smooth.
and yeah.
Well, look, it's not brown, which means that you guys are minding your cold side
yeah.
oxidations. Of course you are. It tasted completely fine. Didn't have that. Do you get that weird sweet candy thing from oxidized NE IPA?
Oh yeah, and you can tell by the hue. It's slightly brown. I mean, it
Purple.
could almost have purple.
Purple
and
is what
just
I
looks
see. Yeah.
awful, and you'll get like just that hot, hop heat to it.
So, gotta ask: you mentioned in your wet IPAs about oats and wheat? Are you a wheat guy, an oat guy, or a both guy?
We do both. Wheat 60%, oats 40%.
Yeah.
We used to do it the other way around, and I don't know. It's just you brew the same beer 20, 30 times, you start to know the little differences. So this is probably the NE IPA batch like 72. I got
Awesome.
very caught up in trying to perfect this thing.
It's very good.
Yeah, you're
We-
doing it right. I mean, the fact that I enjoy it, yeah. So, well, we're coming up on the end of this episode. I appreciate you joining us, Nate. Of
course.
Caleb, I know that there are a lot of, you guys just got a bunch of fresh, was it not Australian hops or I got the email.
Yeah, so some New Zealand varieties did start showing up from their harvest, so those are rolling in. We don't have Nelson Sauvin yet for all the people asking.
Everyone's asking.
On its way.
We just did the Hop Chronicles on 2018 Nelson, and it was different. It had that same kind of white, Sauvignon Blanc kind of character, but it was different than what I remember it being in the past. But anyways, not wet hops, but still fresh hops right now. And you guys have them
Well, and we did so today we're recording on a Sunday. Last Friday, we did just get our first pellets of the 2019 harvest. So we did get Sabro and Brew One pellets. Those will be available for purchase on Monday.
Perfect. So by the time this show comes out, go to YakimaValleyHops.com, buy both Sabro and Brew One. You will not be disappointed.
And actually, together they work
And
really,
I was
really
gonna
well.
say,
That's what we were doing over at the Haas, and man, that blend was so good.
What does it make you think of? Remember I said it when we were there.
Makes me think of Hawaii.
I get pina colada.
Thank
Absolutely.
We were gonna do one next week and call it "Getting Caught in the Rain."
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
That's an awesome name. It honestly, those two together taste like a pina colada. And what a unique way to make a New England IPA, to have a pina colada flavored New England IPA. I mean, that's so unique and awesome and easy to do now with these hops. So, well, I appreciate you guys both coming on the show. Are there any final words anybody has on brewing wet hop beers or just talking about harvest in general? Awesome.
No, the only thing I was to say is if you haven't been down for harvest, it's an amazing experience.
That's where I was going.
Yeah. I mean, there's no cooler place to be
so
during
much
this time of
positive
year.
energy. Everybody's super supportive of everybody else, and it's just all fresh hop. Everything.
Yeah,
So
you're
good.
walking through the city and smelling hops.
Yeah.
That same smell that you get in wet hop beers, which is pretty rad.
You're bumping our elbows with some awesome brewers at local watering holes, and we're all super excited to talk about what we're doing.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
brag.
I've not run into a jerk yet, so...
Do we have a minute to talk about like harvesting if you're growing your own hops at home?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That is one of the most frequent questions we do get. Like, hey, I got this vine growing up in my front yard. When do I harvest it? It is variety dependent, but you got to pretty much do what the farmers do. Just go out, touch it every single day. It's going to start out little green, little dense. You do want it to kind of start opening up. Feeling a little crispy, maybe a little crunchy on the outside.
I heard papery one time.
Papery, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the best way to say it. But feel the strig running down the middle. That's kind of like the spine that the glands grow off of. You want that to be nice and fat, fruited out. You want that a little brown, little papery on the outside, still green, but just tear open the cones every day. You want them to be yellow, bright yellow, bordering on orange. You don't want them
Light
brown. You don't want them, you don't want them dark orange. That means they can be a little overripe. There you start getting the classic OG. So just smell them, tear them open. If they smell good, put them in beer.
Awesome. And for those people who don't want to use them as wet hops, they do have to, there's easy ways to dry them, right? You can make like a screen.
I actually messed around with that the very first year I was homebrewing. I took like what I couldn't use, and I took our dehydrator and I just laid them out on all the little brackets and left it overnight. House smelled 10 times better than it ever has. And then I vacuum sealed them and threw them in the freezer. And I did dry hop with them the next year, and it worked out.
Awesome.
So, there is hope.
Yeah, I've used hops that other people have grown and dried out, like homebrewers.
Mm-hmm.
They work great as long as you dry them out right. I mean, there's really no good way to know that they're at 10% moisture, except for feeling them, and know what a hop cone feels like. So, well, awesome. If you're ever in the Yakima area, whether it be around harvest time or not, you have to make it a point to stop at Wandering Hop. You can bug Nate and the rest of the crew over there. Thank you again for coming on the show, Nathan.
Thanks for having us.
And I promise you're not going to regret drinking his beers. I mean, Brian's over here enjoying them right now. Also, of course, if you're in Yakima, you got to come to Yakima Valley Hops, pick up some hops and other gear. Don't forget to head over to brewlosophy.com to keep up on all the sciencey, brewy stuff that we're up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.